As of earlier this year, there was information gathered from the IUID Registry that reported there's in excess of 32,705,000 assets that are registered to the IUID Registry, which is still only a fraction of the total estimated number of assets, according to the GAO, dated back in their assessment back in May of 2012, which, as we know, there's been many more assets added to the mix since 2012. But 122 million is the total asset count that represents the significant portion of assets that need to be accounted for, using this approach or these methodologies. It's also important here to reflect on the benefits of auto ID technology because it truly is a best practice for identifying the assets and the uniqueness of those assets from cradle to grave, from the moment they're in design all the way through to the end of life, the performance of those assets, the location of those assets, the readiness of those assets. On behalf of just really good asset management best practices. But specifically, we can see that although the assets on the right-hand side look exactly the same in the same categories, they all have their own uniqueness. So total asset visibility is the goal. And again, timely and accurate information on the location of items, the quantity, the condition, and the status of those items. Another way to put it is to say to know what you have and then actually buy only what you need, and then reducing the spares and the costs associated with those spares. And a lot of times parts of the services that have a need for a particular kind of asset certainly could have a warehouse unbeknownst to them up the road that could be housing the same item, and that they need to go back out and re-procure, not knowing what was properly in stock because they didn't have visibility of what was in the warehouse up the road. GAO has performed many reports to that effect. Some branches of the services can have many billions of dollars worth of excess spares and parts within their inventory, and that's been reported from the GAO. Also, this technology enables the property books to be updated and any ERP systems to enable this audit process that we're talking about, whether it's contract audit or whether it's property audit to the tune of the existence and completeness obligation. Really, Auto ID also eliminates that slow, error-prone manual processing, the processing by spreadsheets, which we so often see, which can be fraught with error and lots of time-consuming, very manual combing through records, combing through physical inventories of items and trying to match them up properly. So much so that ultimately these inventories or cycle counts never really get done to the full extent because there's just not enough time in a day or in a period of time to achieve that level. And the other is the return on investment, in which it's been an estimates of the Joint Logistics Board within the military that a $3.2 billion investment in this technology yields an annual ROI of over $4 billion, and that's year over year. Now, you don't need the $3.2 billion, up front to get the investment back. These are all program by program and incremental kind of investments that can yield that kind of strong return, within a year to two's time frame by leveraging this technology. And there very well is proven benefits to the warfighter in the field for their safety and preparedness. Number one is we know that counterfeit parts entering the supply chain is a problem within the military buy cycles, from electronics with circuit boards that may have counterfeit parts or components to even more sophisticated or harder goods that involve body armor and SAPI plates, and making sure that they're made out of the proper material to keep our soldiers safe. So in eliminating those counterfeits from the supply chain, you can only do that with identifying and tracking the uniqueness of those items and the sources to which they trace back to. Also, you can sustain rapid deployment capability when you know what you have and where it's stored, and that helps to achieve mission success. You also can increase the accuracy and improve your inventory decision making when you know what you have and where it is and what's the state of readiness. So Auto ID technology and IUID in the context of this session is data accuracy from the start. It's not so much about the technology as it really translates to getting accurate data. For contractors, that means saving time and then getting paid faster by some of the tools that we described, the portal tools to upload your data in this new e-commerce approach. It also means utilizing effectively your resources. And commercial organizations outside the military have been proving this for the past essentially 50 years, but more specifically the past 20, 30 years. If you are tracking and identifying with items in a warehouse, there are people that say, hey, if it doesn't have a barcode associated with it, does it really exist? And that's because the information systems improves your ability to know what's in the warehouse at your fingertips on the keyboard. And then, as we already discussed, the overall improved return on investment to the technology. Now, GAO has made their recommendations to the military on how the military can improve their ability to deploy item unique identification. They first say that use the UII data to improve the accountability of equipment, straight up, and increase the efficiencies in the maintenance cycle. Since there's so much going back for maintenance and overhaul within the military, the benefits are significant in those areas. But that means getting barcodes on items first further up the supply chain at what we refer to as the source marking. Also, the military should establish quantifiable interim milestones for gauging the progress of the marking. And I showed you, the iceberg a moment ago with the quantities of assets, and that's, one quantifiable way of saying, okay, how much do we have accounted for that can flow through to those accountable systems of record. Also, make sure that the contractor 2D data matrix barcodes are reliable, because every time a 2D barcode is created and created to the MIL standard 130, it has to be verified and validated, meaning readable, and the syntax needed to be encoded properly in order for those items to be properly received in to the military so that they can track over the life cycle of those items and the barcodes that represent those items. Also, start getting more DoD legacy items marked. That's GAO is no bones about it. Dig into those legacy stockpiles, which are many, many millions deep. They also go on to say, examine and report on contracts that should include acquired items and government property clauses. That's what we're here to talk about. And they have as a result of these GAO recommendations. Also, define requirements for IUID data across the DoD and make sure that that data can flow back to those ERP systems. So the ERP systems are prepared from a systems perspective to handle this data flow coming in, so it's not isolated out in different stovepipes, if you will. And then implement IUID marking to improve asset accountability, tracking, and lifecycle management, which is all the aspects of where just a unique item identifier on an item can impact everything from engineering to maintenance to logistics to property management and to finance. It really does span across all of those areas.